Welcome to Chapter 12. This is on the psychosocial development of adolescence. So let's go ahead and dive right in. Let's begin by looking at how family relationships affect the developing teen. Research has found that the best way to influence positive social, emotional, and academic outcomes in teens is to include parents in the effort. So make sure that the parents are talking with the teens, checking in on their academic progress, knowing who their friends are, and being there for emotional support. One of the ways that this emotional support can be hindered is if the teen is experiencing a divorce between the parents. And so we've done a lot of research on divorce and the effect it has on the children of divorce. One thing we know is that divorce tends to occur most in families with newborns and second in families with adolescents. So that's why we're looking at divorce while we're covering adolescence, because it's actually a pretty common time that we see it occur. So some of the outcomes that we have seen from divorce situations is that the financial hardship of the divorce itself tends to affect teenagers because they are often very concerned with their clothes, with their shoes, with their image, and divorce is very expensive, and so the parents might have to cut back on some of those luxuries that the teens have become used to. We also know that depression is more common in teens of divorce than it is in teens without divorce. It's actually not uncommon for divorced parents to talk bad about each other to the teen. So when the teen is with mom, mom's talking bad about dad. And when the teen's with dad, dad's talking bad about mom. This is actually not appropriate at all because remember that the child is a product of both parents. And so when you're talking bad about the other parent, you're actually indirectly talking bad about that teenager. At least that's how the teenager feels because they're a part of mom and you're talking bad about mom. So in a way, you're talking bad about them, is the feeling that we see a lot of teens have and children have in general when the parents are talking bad about the other. Okay, we also know that it is important to keep discipline consistent between the households. Even if the parent feels guilty about divorce and maybe wants to give the child more leeway, and even if the parents are not getting along with each other, it's important that they somehow manage to have the rules for the child remain the same in both households. So curfew's the same, they have the same policies on social networking, for example, and then they're consistent in monitoring this behavior and keeping a nice structure. We also know that it's common for teens of divorced families to disengage from the family. This actually can be a good thing if the teenager engages in healthy activities like sports, extracurricular activities at school. However, it's a problem when the teens turn to substance abuse, gangs, and illegal activities as they're trying to separate from the family. And research shows that teens without fathers are more likely to have sex earlier. In fact, in one correlational study, we found that the earlier fathers leave, the earlier girls will have sex. One study found that teens from divorced families do better in general than teens in a feuding family. So this suggests that maybe it's healthier for teenagers to be in a peaceful home, even if that means that their parents are divorced, than it would be to be in a home where the parents are constantly fighting. However, there was another study that found that teens said that they were very unhappy when their parents got divorced and that they would actually prefer parents to sleep in separate beds and just like not really talk to each other, but keep the house together. So while that's what teens think they would like, research actually shows that they tend to do better when the family is divorced if there's a lot of fighting going on. Let's take a look at a video that might be a helpful resource for parents that are getting divorced, maybe to show their kids or their teens. It deals with the issues that the children and teenagers often struggle with throughout a divorce.
Wouldn't it be nice if, just like in fairy tales when people got married, they lived happily ever after? It would be, but you and I have to live in the real world. In the real world, things don't always work out exactly as we planned. In the real world, when people get married, sometimes they don't live happily ever after. Sometimes, if things are really bad, mums and dads decide they might live happier ever after if they lived apart. For parents, this can be a difficult and challenging experience, but they're not the only ones affected. Spare a thought for the people who are caught in the crossfire, trapped slap bang in the middle, or what you might call the teen-betweeners. If you don't know what a teen-betweener is, this short video might help you find out. When I say detective, who do you think of? Sherlock Holmes? Inspector Gadget? Inspector Clouseau? CSI? Well, think again. The average teen-betweener has little or no training in investigation, interrogation, or forensics, but they can still be expected to act as an amateur sleuth, and not always in a fun way. When one parent is here and the other is there, it's only natural that one wants to know what the other is doing. But it's not fair that they use the teen-between as go-between, sometimes asking them to pick up clues and report back with information. And that isn't the only role the teen-betweener might have to play out. Parents can often use them to send messages to each other, like a postman with a registered letter. For the teen-betweener, a disrupted home life can be enough of a burden, without having all this extra hassle. And anyway, what's wrong with the phone? And when it comes to school, things aren't always that much simpler. Even the teen-betweener's best mates may not know their situation, and certain scenarios can threaten to give the game away. Take the school play, for example. Let's say the class has just given a barnstorming performance of King Lear, and now it's time to step up and acknowledge the standing ovation. Some kids might be more than happy to openly acknowledge their parents' enthusiastic applause. Well, it's easy when both are sitting together. For the teen-betweener, it's a bit more complicated. Should they look left? Should they look right? Do they wave at one? Or the other? Or both? Or none? Acting out Shakespeare is a breeze in comparison to trying to act relaxed in front of your mates. Everybody loves Christmas, when we all gather together for the biggest feast of the year. Roast potatoes, Brussels sprouts, cranberry sauce, a mountain of veg, plum pudding, brandy butter, and of course, the traditional Christmas turkey. I'm pretty sure most teen-betweeners love Christmas, even though it's not exactly the way it used to be. Well, they say new situations bring new challenges. Anyway, it can't be that difficult to carve a turkey, can it? And Christmas can be a presents bonanza for the teen-between, whereas before they used to get one present from mum and dad, now they might get two. When two parents decide they no longer want to live together, the consequences don't just affect each other, they affect the whole family. We've tried to show you some of the ways in which these effects can manifest themselves. Caught between two different sides is never a nice place to be. The teen-betweener is often forced to deal with situations way out of their league. And guess what? The teen-betweener is on the rise. With more parents choosing to divorce or separate, more and more kids are making the journey from teen to teen-betweener. I'll bet you'd be surprised how many. Take your class in school. Statistically, it's likely that at least 3 or 4 people in your class are also teen-betweeners. You might even sit beside one. They could be your best friend. If you're a teen-betweener, remember 2 things. Firstly, there's nothing wrong with that, and there's absolutely nothing to be ashamed or embarrassed about. And secondly, there's no need to feel alone. We're here to help by giving guidance and support. We've helped plenty of people like you and always work in complete confidence. Remember, if you're a teen-betweener, the worst thing you can do is bottle your emotions up. So, do try and talk to somebody, be it a friend, relative, or us here at Teen Between. If you'd like to find out how we might be able to help, you can visit our website at teenbetween.ie. Those of us who live in the real world know that life isn't a fairy tale. In the real world, things don't always work out exactly as we plan them. That's because life is all about experience, ups, downs, good and bad times. And remember, just because life isn't a fairy tale, that doesn't mean we all can't live happily ever after.
Continuing our discussion on family relations, let's review briefly the parenting styles. So we remember the first was authoritative, and this is when the parents set rules and explain why they exist and why they're beneficial for the offspring. We see that the outcomes of this type of parenting style tend to be the most positive. The next type of parenting style is authoritarian, and this is the parent that says, because I said so. There's rules, they're strict, and they don't really have much of a discussion between their selves and their children with why the rules are what they are. The next type of parenting style is permissive, and this is where there really is no rules whatsoever, and the parent just kind of maybe spoils or gives in to the child's every need and lets the child rule the roost, so to speak. And then the last type of parenting style is uninvolved, sometimes called neglectful. And this is when the parent is pretty much non-existent in their child's life. They really don't know what's going on with their child. They don't have any rules for their child. They're not involved at all. Depending on the degree of this parenting style, it can be considered abusive. So the research on those parenting styles happened a long time ago. Some more current research on parenting styles has introduced a fifth type. And the fifth type of parenting style is called nurturing. It's often sometimes referred to as positive parenting. But the nurturing parent uses indirect methods of parenting and really models their behavior to influence their child's behavior. So they act in the way they want their child to act. They're very interested in their child's behavior. They're very much involved, emotionally supportive, communicative with the children, but they don't make very many rules or punish. Now, there is structure, and there are some rules, but they're not very strict, and they almost never use punishment unless it's necessary in a life-saving situation. If the child was about to do something really wrong, then the parent would step in. And so if the child or the teenager was getting involved in some drugs or criminal activity that was life-threatening or legally problematic, then we would see the parent step in. But generally, the idea behind the nurturing parent is that disappointment from the parents is enough to motivate good behavior in the teen. And as a matter of fact, research actually supports this. We studied 56 families that had a very creative teenager, and we found that parents were this style. They were the nurturing parents. And we also find that through research that the teens that grow up in this type of environment tend to not get involved in criminal activity. They're less likely to get involved in drugs. And they tend to make better decisions academically as well and socially. And so it's thought that this style works because the parents act as a coach. They let the teen make mistakes. They let the teen make decisions. And they're there to help them along the way and prevent them from really getting themselves in trouble. But they understand that growing up, life, maturing, is a process, and it's a learning curve. And so we have to have some failures and make some mistakes to grow and learn as people. And the parents are really there to guide the teenager and just keep them out of a lot of trouble, but understand that mistakes are likely to occur. Okay, let's watch a video that goes more into depth on how to do this type of parenting and the beneficial outcomes of it.
Well, there is ample research that shows that spanking is not only ineffective, I mean, in fact, it can increase disobedience and aggression in children, but it's potentially harmful, and certainly it hurts. But what about screaming? A new study looked at yelling and other forms of verbal aggression and concluded that raising your voice isn't much better than raising that hand, either in a threat or actually following through. So I really was very pleased to be able to welcome to the show someone who knows a lot about better ways of disciplining your kids. Amy McCready is the founder of Positive Parenting Solutions. Amy, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So we've all been there. You have had a really bad day, really long day. You get home, the kids are driving you insane. You ask them once, you ask them twice, and then finally you just raise your voice thinking, okay, maybe they didn't hear you the first time or the second time. But and certainly I think a lot of parents are very stressed out these days. But what do you think is the number one reason that we resort to screaming and yelling?
Society at large recognizes that spanking is not a good idea. As you said, it's harmful and it's not effective. But in the absence of other strategies that really work, parents are really at a loss. And so then they resort to this pattern of repeating and reminding and repeating and reminding and then exploding. They feel guilty afterwards, and the whole process starts all over again.
Right, and I think that one of the things I often say to parents is that if you've said the same thing 50 times, louder and louder and louder, maybe you're not the maybe they're not the slow learner. I mean, your kids are clearly telling you that whatever it is you're doing isn't effective. What are some of the things you counsel parents to try?
One of the ways is to do what we call mind, body, and soul time, and that is spending time with our kids one-on-one on a daily basis when we're totally present with them in mind, body, and soul. And it's amazing, just spending 10 minutes, 1 or 2 times a day with your child, filling their attention basket in positive ways makes a world of difference in their behavior. You'll very quickly see that the attention-seeking behaviors like whining and clinging and helplessness really start to fall off the radar screen.
Right. And then how about the power component? What do you recommend?
Well, we have to intentionally give kids power. From our kids' perspective, they think we have all the power and we make all the decisions. So the second strategy we recommend is to give power by giving choices. And that's really thinking about your routine throughout the day and find opportunities to give your kids choices, because every time they make a choice, they're making an important decision. And decision making equals power. When we're giving them positive power by letting them have some control over their lives, it gives them a huge boost of positive power.
Yeah, the only tweak I would put on that is I think you also have to watch that when kids have too much power, you do see parents where, the kid is, do you want this or do you want this? And they get the decision-making capability for everything, and that can actually create a certain amount of anxiety. So I think understanding what your child needs in terms of that power is very important. But I really love this notion of thinking about your child's day as an opportunity to, again, foster that sense that I have some control. And then you also talk about fostering capability in terms of chores, in terms of just, helping them boost their skills. What kinds of things are you talking about?
Well, that can be done in so many ways. I think we have to really intentionally look at our kids and think about what things could we train them to do to be more capable and independent and self-sufficient. And sometimes those are things that they can do to contribute to the family in the way of different family tasks. For a toddler, it could be setting the table or watering the plants or feeding the pet. For a teenager, it might be meal preparation. But we don't often think about our role as a parent is to train our kids to be independent and self-sufficient and responsible. When we start doing that, giving them responsibility for important tasks, and they're contributing in the family in a meaningful way, you can see their sense of power soar.
Right. All right. Let's end with the most important, which is, let's say you've done all these things right and they're still driving you crazy, and they do something that is deliberately and in your face. Okay, now what are you going to do, Mom?
Well, you're right. Sometimes we still need to bring in the consequences, but it's important that we use smart consequences. And in our training, we help parents understand the 4 R's of an effective consequence. The fourth R is the one that most people don't often think about, and that's revealing it in advance. We have to reveal the consequence in advance so our child can make the choice between the appropriate behavior and the inappropriate behavior.
Right. Well, that,
And-
yeah, they're understanding what's going to come down the pike if they do it again.
Absolutely. And I think laying out the consequence very clearly for them and then asking them to repeat back to you. So what is your understanding of our rule and what is your understanding of the consequence? That way they repeat it back to you. Now you have a verbal agreement. Everybody's very clear on what the consequence is going to be. And so if they make the inappropriate choice, it was their decision. It wasn't you being the bad guy. They were empowered to make the choice, and they made that decision.
Well, Amy, I would love you to go through all of these. I want to just make sure that we give our viewers the website so they can get this advice and other wonderful advice about positive parenting. Where should they go for more?
Well, they can go to positiveparentingsolutions.com, and there are a lot of free training opportunities so parents can start to learn these skills, so they have some new tools in their toolbox. So perhaps they won't be as quick to want to yell or even spank.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Amy, for joining us. That was great advice, and we would love to have you back sometime to talk more about discipline and other challenges we all have. So thanks so much.
Thanks, Annie. I love that too. I appreciate it.
ABC News Now. Good to know.
Okay, go ahead and pause the video here, head on over to Moodle, complete lecture activity number 1, and then return to this point in the lecture. Okay, so let's take a look at peer relationships in teenagers and the role that they have on the social development. We know now that teenagers are spending more time with their peers than they ever have in the past. And so these peer relationships are a source of support for the teens and also become a central method of entertainment and engagement and activities. So in other words, the teenagers are spending the majority of their time with their friends. And because of this time spent with their friends, the influence that the peers have on their behavior increases greatly during teenage years. When we are teenagers, we have to remember that we're going through a lot of biological changes in our brain and our hormones, and so there's a lot of emotional issues that teenagers are dealing with. And one study looked at the way that they handle these emotional issues and broke it down into 2 categories. So one of the ways to handle their emotions is with externalization, which includes things like smoking, shoplifting, drinking. You can think of this as kind of an outward expression of whatever emotional turmoil they're feeling. And another possible category is internalizing or internalization. And this is if a teenager is having a difficult time managing their emotions, we might find them kind of internalize those emotions, keep them to themselves, not talk to anyone about them, and this could lead to things like depression and anxiety. Not all teenagers have externalization or internalization, but it's something that we've observed occur pretty frequently. What we do know is that deviant peers tend to increase externalization in a teenager. So if a teenager is hanging around with other teens that are breaking the law or not doing well in school, then they are more likely to get involved in things like smoking, shoplifting, and drinking. But good news for parents is that research has also found setting limits of like curfews or how long you're allowed to hang out with your friends and having consistent discipline, not punishment, but schedules, structure. You need to be home by this time because you have to go to baseball practice at this time, or dinner's every day at 6 and you need to be home at 6 for dinner. Was found to decrease externalization. Unfortunately, research hasn't really found any method of parenting that is successful in reducing internalization as of yet. We do know that during the teen years, teens withdraw from spending time with parents, like we've discussed, and increase time with peers for a number of reasons. One of the reasons why is because they want to start hanging out with the opposite sex. It's often thought that teenagers just want to engage in sexual activity when they're hanging out with the opposite sex. But actually, the majority of the time that they're hanging out with the opposite sex, they're exploring kind of this opposite gender and the relationship that they can have with them, or if they're homosexual, exploring a romantic relationship with someone of the same sex. And this is really introducing them to a new style of relationships, intimate, romantic, and perhaps sexual in nature. But generally, what we see in these teen relationships that are more romantic or with the opposite sex, if they're heterosexual, is that they are not engaging in sexual activities the majority of the time, but they're getting to know each other. And these relationships can actually be a very healthful and beneficial form of developing social skills. And these early relationships that they have can often be predictive of how their future relationships will go if they learn from their mistakes in their teenage years, and have experiences with a romantic partner that are emotional. It does shape their further emotional relationships. So there's some learning that can occur in these relationships other than just sex. We also know that teens seek out more spaces where they can hang out alone. They like to be alone and isolated from their parents, perhaps to kind of work on that identity that Erickson talks about, figuring out who they are, what they stand for, things like that. We also know that they start becoming aware of the subculture of adolescent world, of the adolescent world. So teens act different than kids, and they're exposed to different things. Some of the things that we might see in this quote-unquote teen subculture are things like social networking, parties, talking on the phone, texting. These are different activities than we usually see in younger children. One study found that when teen girls talk on the phone, 46 to 60% of the conversation is about peer relationships, and 10 to 20% of their conversations are about family problems. We are going to talk more about the importance of developing an identity during these teen years, but it is important for the teens to do this, and one of the ways they kind of figure out who they are as people is to identify with a crowd, and we see this as a common thing that teens do. And so interestingly, studies have found that there are certain crowds that we see, particularly in high schools, that have existed across time and culture. So for example, in the 50s in America, there were still the stoners, the jocks, the cheerleaders, the drama queens, the band people, and so those groups still exist today. And this is a big part of teen subculture and figuring out who we are. We kind of start to identify with different crowds. We also know through research that within crowds are certain cliques. And so we know that teens will gravitate towards an even smaller group of people within the crowd that they identify with, and then develop more intimate, bonding, connectedness type of relationships with the cliques inside of the crowd. Like we previously mentioned, groups are a necessary part of adolescence, and they assist in the adolescent's development in a variety of ways. The first of which is they help to control aggressive impulses. Observing how our peers deal with conflict can demonstrate assertiveness to us instead of, say, bullying. So we can learn some good practices to dealing with our aggressive urges. Also, we can learn some bad practices. Another one is the peer group allows us to have emotional and social support. And this emotional and social support actually helps teens to become more independent. This is important because in adulthood, we have to become less dependent on our family, financially, emotionally. And so this is really the start of kind of that necessary separation. The next one is our peers help us to improve social skills, develop reasoning ability, and learn to maturely express our feelings. So our teen relationships are a great practice for expressing our feelings of love and caring, as well as anger and negative feelings. These relationships help us to develop our attitudes towards sexuality, towards gender role behavior. It helps us to figure out what is acceptable, good, bad, right, and wrong in terms of our sexuality and our gender. These teen relationships also help to strengthen our moral judgment and our values. See, our parents tell us what's right and wrong, But it's really when we get around our peers that we can evaluate what they're doing and then kind of compare it to what we've been taught and figure out what our own morals are. And this is very necessary for us to develop our own identity. And the final way that peers help us to develop is that they can improve our self-esteem. Being liked by people, being called, being asked to hang out helps teens to feel very good about themselves. Now, obviously, as we've listened to these different areas of the ways that peer relationships can help us to develop, it's apparent that this isn't true for everyone. Not everyone gets called and asked to hang out. And so, in a sense, maybe these teen relationships might decrease self-esteem. Not everyone is around people that are good influences. And so, not all of these developmental areas proceed in a healthful way. What we know is that the way we learn from our peers, whether it's good for us or bad for us, depends on the teen themselves, their own temperament, their own personality, and also their background, the parenting that they've had, the emotions that they've had throughout their life, what they've been exposed to, and also who they are hanging around affects how they develop in terms of the items on this list. Go ahead and pause the video here and head over to Moodle, complete lecture activity number 2, and then we will see you when you're back. So like we said, teens are hanging out with peers that they can engage in romantic relationships with, and sometimes this does lead to sexual behavior. So let's look at the development of that sexual behavior. First of all, we know that teens are becoming sexually active at younger ages than ever before. 75% of college sophomores are not virgins. We know through research that teen athletes are less likely to be sexually active than non-athletes, contrary to popular belief. It's thought that this is due to their rigorous athletic schedules. Studies show that magazines are supporting teen sex and stereotypes that girls should be sexually subordinate to boys, and all of this might be leading to the earlier ages when sexual activity begins. However, studies also show that girls report more sexual assertiveness than boys, meaning that girls tend to be the one who instigates the sexual contact more than boys do. So psychologists believe that human sexuality moves from masturbation to sex with others, and it progresses in a 3-stage process. These stages may or may not include overt sexual behavior. So in other words, they could just be thoughts or fantasies, and for some teenagers, they might act on these thoughts or fantasies. It's different for each individual. But the 3 stages begin with autosexuality, which is the love of oneself. And so in autosexuality, this is the stage at which the child becomes aware of sexual pleasure, and they consciously experiment with masturbation. Now, shockingly to most people, and probably uncomfortably to most people, we find that on average, the child might begin experimenting with their body, perhaps even masturbating, as early as age 3, and this continues until about age 7. Although for some children, it will in fact last longer. And so it's important to understand, like we've discussed before, that children do not have the same concept of sex as adults do. However, their bodies are wired to feel pleasure in their sexual centers, and so when they touch those areas, they do feel a sense of pleasure. They don't have the cognitive abilities to necessarily understand what that pleasure means or associate it with any type of sexual activity. However, they are feeling those sensations. And so this autosexuality really is just kind of about getting to know their own body. The next stage is called homosexuality, which is the love of one's own sex. Again, this does not have to include overt sexual behavior. It does not have to include touching, and often doesn't. It's really more about the emotion, the connectedness, the intimacy that kids tend to feel with their same-sex peers. For example, girls will have the BFF heart necklace that they break in half, and each best friend wears one half. They might dress the same as each other. This stage really starts to occur at age 7 and usually lasts till they're about 13, but we see that it's especially intense between the age of 10 and 12. Occasionally, this love of your same-sex peer turns into overt sexual behavior. In fact, studies show that about 1/3 of people within this age have a same-sex sexual encounter. Usually, this is the result of curiosity and is not, in fact, latent homosexuality. Just kind of experimenting and seeing what it's like to have some type of sexual activity with the friend that you're bonded and connected with. Some people, however, do stay in this stage forever. The last stage is heterosexuality, which is the love of the opposite sex. Generally, with the exception of homosexuals, we see people move into this stage at about age 13 or 14, but generally girls get to this stage about 1 year before boys. Okay, we do know that most people try masturbation around the ages of 4 or 5. Generally, if they are caught doing it, they're chastised for it, and then they stop, and usually will start again around age 14. Now, they might be chastised for it directly, or they might overhear jokes about masturbation from other people or on the media and start to feel a sense of guilt, which is something that will lead them to stop. Psychologists believe that masturbation is a healthy way to act out our innate sexual drives. However, teens often feel shame, guilt, and fear. The fear is that they are addicted to masturbation, especially boys tend to worry about this. However, generally they're not addicted. Psychologists say that it is necessary to masturbate to form a positive sexual attitude. It's also a safe way of having sexual needs fulfilled that doesn't lead to STDs or teen pregnancy, and allows people to get to know their own bodies, which research shows leads to greater sexual satisfaction. Okay, let's go ahead and watch a video on masturbation.
Can Alex answer 20 questions about masturbation in 60 seconds? Let's find out. Is masturbation bad? Can girls masturbate? Will it make my period late? Will it make me unable to get an erection? Will masturbating damage my genitals? Is masturbating dirty? Will it give me acne? Make me go blind? Make hair grow on my palms? Is it okay to masturbate if I'm in a relationship? Will masturbating make me unable to have sex? Will it make my penis bigger? Can masturbating help me understand how to have an orgasm? What if I masturbate and I don't have an orgasm? Do I masturbate too much? Is more than once a day too much? Am I masturbating too much if I've skipped school, haven't seen my friends, called in sick to work, have lost interest in Glee, all so that I can stay home and masturbate? Do some religions, cultures, and families encourage people not to masturbate? Is it okay if I don't masturbate? Do most people masturbate? Congratulations, Alex, you've done it. This has been...
Okay, let's look at some theories on how we develop our sexuality. And so we'll take a look at homosexual behavior. It's said that 1 in 10 people identify as homosexuals. And there are many different theories on how we develop our sexuality. We'll start with Sigmund Freud's theory. So this is called the psychoanalytic theory of masturbation. And this is Freud's theory that if the child's first sexual feelings about the parent of the opposite sex are strongly punished, then that child may become homosexual. So if you remember the Oedipus complex, for example, the child is in love with their mother, and Freud says wants to have sex with their mother. If they are kind of made fun of for how much they love mom or whatever, they might interpret this as being made fun of because they like a girl, rather than understanding that they're being made fun of because they like their mom. And so Freud said that when this misunderstanding occurs, it causes them to think it's wrong to like girls, and this leads to their homosexuality. However, this theory is not supported by science, basically at all. Okay, the next theory is the learning theory of homosexuality. This theory says that most people learn to be homosexual, but for little understood reasons, some people learn to be heterosexual. So there is a difference between our sexuality depending on what we learn through our environment. This also is not well supported by science at all. Let me give you some research that is well supported by science. So this is the biopsychosocial theory of homosexuality. And so it really stems or draws from biological explanations for how we develop our sexuality. The first is the theory that some factor in a person's DNA affects their temperament, which affects sexual orientation. We have not found a gay gene, as it's often referred to as in the media. However, we have found some components that turn on genes or turn off genes that relate to sexuality. So there is some evidence that there might be something in our DNA that does affect whether or not we will become straight or gay or bisexual. But it is not a straightforward gene that determines this, just kind of how the gene functions. We also found that gay men have larger anterior hypothalamuses than straight men. And so the hypothalamus is the part of the brain that regulates sexual behavior. Researchers have also found a difference in the spatial ability and auditory differences in homosexuals versus heterosexuals, and this is said to be due to the hormone exposure that occurs when we are in the 12th week of our mother's womb. How much testosterone or estrogen we're exposed to affects our brain development. Researchers have found a difference in the finger length for heterosexuals and homosexuals that again is due to this prenatal hormonal exposure. There's also the older brother effect. And so the older brother effect is the idea that the more older biological brothers a boy has, the more likely he is to be gay. And this is because the female body produces antibodies against male fetal cells that get stronger with each male baby. And so in order for the males to survive, the body of the mother must change its hormonal balance, possibly producing less androgens, less testosterone, which means that the more boys a mother has, the more estrogen each male baby is exposed to, or the lack of testosterone the baby is exposed to. And so it's said that each brother increases the likelihood of being homosexual by 33%. We also know that anterior hypothalamus that we talked about earlier is the same size in gay men and straight women. Studies show that lesbians are 91% more likely to be left-handed, and gay men are 34% more likely to be left-handed. This indicates a difference in the brain structure and brain activity between different types of sexuality. One study found the degree of symmetry between the left hemisphere and the right hemisphere of the brain are different in heterosexuals and homosexuals. Another study found that gay men and straight women's brains are similar, and lesbians have similar brains to straight men, as you can see in this picture here. Okay, so we also know that the mental health of homosexual teens depends on parental acceptance. Homosexual teens that do not feel accepted by their parents tend to not be as well adjusted emotionally, psychologically, behaviorally. Okay, let's go ahead and watch a clip of Dr. Phil talking to LGBT teens and getting kind of a feel for their experiences, what it's like to be a gay or transgendered teen.
Okay, I am back with Mark and Delicato, and we have a group of teens here. These teens are gay and lesbian teens. They're out about it. They talk about it. And they also talk about what has happened along this journey, what their life has been like. Isaiah is here, James is here, Sarah is here, Claudia, Nicholas, and Jake. Also with us, we have Charles Robbins from the Trevor Project. We have Perry Aftab, and we have Lonnie Coombs, who is our legal correspondent, and Nina is here, a friend of Tyler Clemente. So we're just going to kind of continue this conversation. James, let's start with you. What do you want to say?
Well, I just think, I remember you mentioning something about, the humiliation in school and Tyler Clemente. And I remember one instance when I was on the school bus going to school one day, and we were talking about the upcoming prom. And I remember, and some kid just turned to me out of the blue and said, "You're not going to take a boy to prom, are you? Because that would be really weird." And I know it's a much less severe case, but I think it's just that same kind of feeling of being put down and being humiliated and being targeted specifically because of who you are. Or, I think it's the same kind of that feeling that it gives.
But
these kids.
Here's the question I've got, and this is not just for you, for all of you. When this has happened, did you go to an adult? Because I saw a stat one time that bothered me. Charles, you probably have a much more up-to-date number on this than I do, but I read a study that said 86% of gay and lesbian teens said they did not have one adult supporter that they could identify in their school situation. 86% said they had not one adult that they felt safe talking to.
That's right, and they generally report that that the school environment, from the help seeking that they have seen, they didn't feel comfortable in any kind of disclosure around sexual orientation at all.
What's an interesting thing to take from this too is that we as fellow teens really should take this to heart ourselves. We should become allies ourselves and allow other students to come talk to us. I mean, whether it be just being a positive, open person, or doing something like starting a gay-straight alliance club in your own school, or there's a number of things that you can do as a student yourself to help alleviate tensions that someone may be feeling.
When you got these letters that you got based on the character you played on Ugly Betty, Mark, did you answer them? What did you say to them? How did you support them?
I didn't know exactly how I could support them without just saying, this does get better, and you have to talk to someone, whether it's a friend, a teacher, joining the Gay Straight Alliance Club in your school, if that's even offered, or going to a group where, teens can talk to each other. Because I think that, like you said, is one of the main issues, that these teens don't have anyone to talk to, and they're left there contemplating themselves, which often can lead to much more serious matters like suicide.
And you said you had funny feelings about playing this character.
Mm-hmm.
What went through your mind when somebody said, okay, here's a great show, it's going to be on network, it's going to be ABC, but you're going to play a gay teenager?
They didn't tell me about becoming an actual gay teen and actually exposing that until our last season, which was season 4. And when we were discussing about how we were going to handle it, the only funny feelings is that we weren't going to do it in the right way or make it seem real enough, because I didn't want this to be, the dramatized television version that no one in the world or no teen can ever relate to. So that was one of the biggest issues that I had, and luckily, we did come out with a fabulous product that, speaking to all of these guys about it, they said that these dramatized situations actually do happen, which I was, kind of pleased and to hear that, we could reach out like that.
Sarah, what do you want to say?
I just think that if everyone standing by has the attitude that Dion had, that, you're just going to walk away, there's going to be no one left. In my situation, the bullying never happened to my face. It happened very indirectly. It was through MySpace. It was, texting me, calling me. And, my entire graduating class from middle school knew that this was happening, and not one person felt bad about it. No one felt, no one felt the guilt to take this to their parents, this is what's happening. Everyone is going after her. You know, what can I do to stop this? I mean, this was a Christian middle school, and I mean, I wasn't the kid that had all these friends or whatever. I was the new kid, but the fact that no one had enough respect for me to go to their parents and say, you know what, this has gotten way out of control. This is what's happened. What can we do to stop this?
Well, what was happening? What did they say to you? What did you get
My
on
graduation
internet
day,
or whatever?
My graduation day, a girl sent around a text to her friends saying that I was a lesbian, which I had confided in one person at that school and she had overheard. Well, then those 10 friends or whatever then sent that text to 10 of their own friends. And as you can see, it spiraled, and I showed up on my graduation day and every single person had read this, and every single person, either gave me dirty looks or, made comments about, I was a dyke or I was a freak. And they ruined my graduation day. I sat in fear because I was pretty sure that if a teacher or an administrator found out, I wouldn't be allowed to walk at my graduation because it was a Christian school. And then from graduation day, it turned to harassing messages and comments on my MySpace profile. I finally had to delete it because, it was a knock to my self-esteem to, log on to a place where I was supposed to be able to connect with my friends and see these things.
What would they say on your
they would tell me that I was going to burn in hell, or that I was a freak, or, one kid said randomly that he hoped I was struck down by lightning. And, it was middle school, and, part of me looks back and, maybe I could have brushed some of it off, but I went into high school not being able to trust anyone.
Did you talk to your parents about it?
I wasn't out to my family at this point, and I wasn't confident enough in myself or the fact that they would take it well to go to my parents and say, this is what's going on.
But see, Perry Charles, this is what scares me as the perfect storm. Because here you have someone that's been outed in the school, you're not out to your parents, you're getting bombarded, you're getting in fear. This, to me, is the perfect storm.
It's the perfect storm not only because of technology, but also youth are identifying with being lesbian, gay, bisexual much earlier in life. And so you actually have more of a complex problem.
Well, on the technology here, it made it so easy for people to attack her. And the fear that that could leak back to her parents when she wasn't outed there, or to the administration that wouldn't let her walk on graduation. It's that fear of what happens next. That's what happens. One thing turns into hundreds of thousands.
Yeah, that's just, Claudia?
And jumping on what Sarah said, I really don't think that we should be fighting hate with hate, because you hear out there, that's so gay, faggot, whatever. And in Sarah's case, she was being constantly called names like lesbian, dyke, right? And I mean, people out there are saying, damn straight, and then that's just, not appropriate, because we're also targeting them as LGBTQ teens. Or even if you are straight, I mean, that's just, we shouldn't be targeting any sexuality at all. And especially, I was sort of in Sarah's situation. I was being called a lot of names and physically harassed. And one day, this boy who really wasn't nice to me at all was kind of in a rough situation, and I kind of talked to a teacher for him. And all of a sudden, he was just a lot nicer. I could have sat there. I could have said, hey, well, you've been so mean to me. I don't think that you deserve help. And I could have, not given it to him. But because I did, things really took a turn for the better.
The thing that gets me is we've got kids that feel they have nowhere to go, so they're emailing you, who's playing a character on a television show. Not even a real person, but they're reaching out to you in that role, presumably instead of their parents. I mean, it certainly sounds like it. Lonnie, is there some middle room here without taking away people's First Amendment rights to say what they want, but yet hold them accountable if they're terrorizing someone?
Okay, so most people view first intercourse as the key moment in sexual development. In terms of heterosexual behavior, 22% of girls who had sex before 15 actually said that their first coitus was not voluntary and occurred with a male over the age of 18. Another study looked at 1,400 sixth graders and found that 35% of them had already had sex. So we know that risk factors like substance abuse, going to raves, and criminal delinquency, as well as skipping school, are correlated with first coitus. A significant amount of sexual exploration usually does occur before the first time the teenager has sex, though. This might include touching, heavy petting, dry humping, things of this nature. Having sex too early does come with a number of adverse outcomes, study shows. For example, increased chance for pregnancy, obviously, increased chance for STDs. But then maybe what's less expected is also we see that when teens have sex too early, it often leads to low self-esteem, especially for girls, and social ridicule, especially for girls. In terms of the teen mom or the teenage parent, fathers included, each year, we know that 1 million teens become pregnant in the United States alone. Half of those pregnancies result in birth, 1/3 of those pregnancies result in abortion, and 1/6 of those pregnancies result in miscarriage. There are several factors that put teens at greater risk for pregnancy. Some of those factors include poverty, unsafe communities, a single-parent household, sexual abuse, teen siblings who are sexually active. All of these factors, generally in combination, tend to lead to a higher rate of teen pregnancy. However, research does show that recently teen pregnancies are on the decline. Some people assume that this is due to things like Plan B or how easily accessible abortions are. But in fact, we're finding that the abortion rate has not increased, while teen pregnancy has in fact decreased. So research actually shows that the reason for this is more due to contraception and education. Okay, let's take a look at some illegal behavior that we sometimes see in teenagers. One of the main and most common types of illegal behavior during adolescence is alcohol use. And research does show that excessive alcohol use in teen years can impair later brain functioning. Specifically, it can damage memories, learning ability, and even language skills. Research shows that teens who begin drinking before the age of 14 are 3 times more likely to hurt themselves than people who start drinking at 21. Ways that they could hurt themselves includes falls, burns, intentional wounds like cutting, and car accidents. About 35% of teens smoke cigarettes. This is more common in male. As friends smoke or see it at school, this number does in fact increase. Okay, let's go ahead and watch a video on how alcohol affects the brain in adolescence.
Hi, my name is Monica, and the video you're about to see is a little different than others you've probably viewed, and that's because afterwards we're going to come back and talk to real students just like you who've watched it and see what they think. So let's take a look, and then we'll be back and talk to these guys and see what they say.
I think people drink to have fun, honestly.
Try to have a good time.
People drink because they try to look cool.
I just wanted to see how it tastes because I was curious.
There's a lot of peer pressure. That's what it is.
If you start drinking at like 15 or 16, it's too young because you could get addicted to the flavor.
I think it affects people differently. Some people, if they do it too much, probably are affected.
I think it just depends on your body, how much you drink.
I heard that alcohol beverages stunt your growth.
I doubt when you're like 80 years old you're going to be like stupid or something because you drank so much.
I try not to drink during the week because I have to go to work.
I usually drink on the weekends.
Probably mostly on weekends when we go out, and it's not like every day of the weekend, maybe like a Friday night.
Alcohol is the #1 used and abused drug in America. But what do we really know about how it affects the brain?
Okay, in terms of criminal behavior, we know that gang violence has in fact increased by 50% over the last 3 years. Some of the reason that teens get involved in gangs is because they offer youth protection, at least in the eyes of the teenager, some recognition, a feeling of belongingness, and it's sort of a rite of passage that marks achievement, status, and acceptance in the teenager's mind. For many, gangs offer a structure that they have never had before in life, that they didn't get from their families, that they didn't get from their parents, particularly if they had neglectful parents or overly permissive parents. Some of the reasons that we see teenagers join gangs is due to peer pressure, family involvement, like they have a sibling or a cousin or someone in their family is also in a gang. If they are in financial hardship, gangs can offer ways to make money, like selling drugs. And if the teen is involved in substance abuse, they are more likely to get involved in gangs. However, this can lead to their own deaths or being involved in illegal activities can land them in prison or court or things like that. Okay, that concludes Chapter 12. Head on over to Moodle to complete Lecture Activity 3. And then don't forget to do the journal and the forum assignment as well. And we will see you for Chapter 13. Have a good week.